Hi, welcome to Viewfinders. I'm your host, Graham Dargy, and today my guest is Valda Bailey, an artist from Sussex, England. Valda's incredible photography uses a variety of techniques to explore nature and create something truly unique. If you're not familiar with Valda's work, I recommend you take a look. I recorded this interview back in 2018 for a project that fell off my radar at the time. Revisiting the recording for this project was fascinating, and I found Valda to be a smart, creative and courageous lady who I really admired. The conversation ranges from Valda's journey to find her own style, why she takes confidence from that journey, how she presses on in difficult times, and much more. If you're on any kind of creative path, I'm sure you'll take a few things away from this episode. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. It really makes a difference to the visibility of the show, and I really appreciate that. I'd love to connect with you, and you can find me on social media and at the Viewfinders webpage, where you can also get more photography tips. Okay, here's my conversation with the amazing Valda Bailey. Thank you, Valda. Thanks so much for coming on. Can you, for anyone who might not know who you are or know your photography, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself and tell us a little bit about your photography?
Okay, my name is Valda Bailey. I make images in an impressionistic style. I suppose it's probably the easiest way to describe what I do. I used to paint. Painting was my first creative love, and the way I take my images is informed by my love of painting. Specifically abstract painting. So I'm really not looking to represent what I see in front of me. I'm looking to interpret it. And my photography is a lot more about ideas than location. And when you take that approach, you're only really constrained by what's going on in your head and your imagination. The one thing that I didn't excel at much when I was at school, but the one thing that did keep coming back on my school reports were remarks about my imagination, and I suppose I've carried that forward, and it now very much influences the way I make my images.
It's quite interesting, I think, that you talk about painting, because your pictures could be paintings, at a glance. Can you take us through, did you always shoot in that style, or was there a moment where something clicked in that way that you thought you could represent things in a more almost painterly kind of way or abstract way?
No, absolutely not. I started out, I used to be a photographer when I was 14, 15. I went off to night school with my dad and learned all the nuts and bolts of shutter speeds and apertures and all that sort of stuff. And I pursued it. We had a dark room, and I sort of really enjoyed getting into that. Then I sort of put it aside in my 20s, and life got in the way, as it tends to do. And I picked up a camera again when the digital revolution came along, probably 2004, maybe something like that. And a friend of mine introduced me to Flickr. So I went on Flickr, and you know what these places are like. You build up a following, get a lot of positive comments, nothing that means very much. But I sort of got into a groove, taking very uninspiring pictures of still lives and puppies and flowers and macro and all that sort of stuff. And I learned a lot there. And I went along with it for a couple of years, and then I suddenly realised that what I was doing was actually very unimaginative. It wasn't creative at all. It was derivative. It was nothing that hadn't been done a million times before by somebody with a better camera, better light, etc., etc. So I started thinking about a way of making images that could be unique to me, that had my voice in them a little bit more strongly. I decided that perhaps the only way, I didn't know about impressionistic landscape photography back then. I had no interest in landscape photography. I just assumed it was a steady parade of milky seas and orange sunsets and calendar fodder, which it just doesn't do it for me. So I thought, well, maybe street photography is the way to go. I can go out and capture the decisive moment, and that can't be replicated. And this could be a way forward for me. So I went off and I did a course with Jay Maisel in New York, and had a lot of fun there, and I learned an awful lot. And I pursued it for a couple of years. And it was okay because my husband and I travelled a fair amount, places like India and so on, where it was quite easy to wave your camera around. Nobody got cross with you. Everything was easy. And but then, of course, I come back to the little town where I live in deepest Sussex, and you go up to the little village, and you can stand on the pavement outside the dry cleaners waiting for the decisive moment, for 3 hours, and it ain't going to happen. And also you're standing there with a telephoto lens, you're liable to get sort of, arrested or something. So from that point of view, it really wasn't desperately convenient. And I was also starting to have misgivings about the ethics of it all. I'm not really the type of person who engages well with people. I'm fairly solitary and I'm very, very introverted. So rather than ask people if I could take their image, I did tend to lurk behind trees and lampposts with a telephoto lens, stealing images. And that's not really cool, I didn't think. If somebody saw me and got angry, shouted at me, they'd ruin my day, they'd probably ruin their day. I thought, well, there's got to be another way. So I did start looking at abstract landscape photography. I went and did a one-to-one with Charlie Waite, actually, to learn about what he was doing at the time. And then one day I came across a photo by a chap called Chris Friel in a magazine. And it was a very abstract image, almost like a Rothko painting of a landscape. It's just sort of 3 bands of colour. I think it was outdoor photography. And it literally stopped me in my tracks because it was an image made using ICM, intentional camera movement, which I had absolutely no knowledge of at the time. And I looked and I read the article, realised he hadn't done it in Photoshop, which didn't interest me either. And I realised he'd done it just by moving his camera around and being creative with the white balance. And it was absolutely pivotal. I realised that there was a way forward for me. So I set about learning all I could about Chris and how he approached his work. And that led me to Doug, who at the time was teaching ICM and techniques that Chris used. So I booked up a one-to-one with Doug. I was so excited. I really couldn't wait. And Doug actually came down and we went off to meet Chris that day. So I was really lucky I got to meet him. Okay. And that was really what started me on the journey, for want of a better word. I realised that there was a way where I could make images, A, that couldn't be replicated, B, that could satisfy my creative urges, and C, the images that was sort of like painting with a camera, I guess. And it just seemed to tick all the boxes for me. I'd have to say I didn't realise at the time how fiendishly difficult it is to get right. It's not prescriptive in the way that traditional landscape photography is. You can put your camera on a tripod and sort out your rule of thirds and F11 and plug in all your bits and pieces, take a shot. And with the cameras the way they are today, you're going to be fairly guaranteed of a half decent shot. Well, ICM isn't like that. You have to be willing to experiment and fail an awful lot. I enjoy that aspect of it too.
Okay, there's a lot in there that I would like to circle back to and touch on, actually. I wanted to ask you about your experience with Jay Maisel, because he's such a obviously well-respected, and if you listen to him talking for like 2 minutes, you pick up so much, Oh,
he's brilliant. He's an absolutely brilliant speaker. I treated myself for my 50th birthday, and it sort of came on the back of 3 or 4 years at Flickr. And, as I say, I had, people following me and making nice comments. But what, of course, I didn't realise was, how empty all those comments were. They don't mean anything. And I booked up for this thing. And it was $5,000. It was a huge amount of money. But I decided, it was a present to myself. And so I trotted off there about a week before Christmas, nearly 10 years ago, actually. I arrived at this, where it used to take place in the bank building in the Bowery. So this massively imposing bank building. And there were 8 of us in the class, 7 guys and me, and we all sat around in the corner in a circle on the first day. And Jay asked us to sort of open up about why we were there. And I was at the end of the line, and as we went round, I realised how out of my depth I was. The first guy was just come back from working with CNN in the Iraq War. Okay. There was a professional photographer from California shooting magazines, and some other professional from Germany who'd been all around the world with some newspaper. And it came to me, and I sort of said, well, I'm a 50-year-old housewife from Sussex, and, here I am. And I realised at the time that, okay, maybe I am a bit out of my depth here. And it never was more apparent than we were sent out onto the street to, shoot New York, which, obviously there's huge amounts happening there. But the next morning we had to present 10 images, each of us, and they were projected onto a screen in one of the huge boardrooms. So we all sat around this enormous mahogany table, and we had to critique everybody's images as they were up there on the screen. And of course, I've come from Flickr, where a critique is something like nice capture, great colours, and that wasn't what was required at all. And it very quickly became apparent that, I just didn't have the dialogue, I didn't have the language, the narrative. I was totally out of my depth. And Jay very quickly sort of cottoned on to this, and he takes no prisoners. He's fairly gruff, but he has got a kind heart. And I think it was about the second or third day. I remember phoning my husband saying, "I can't do this. I want to come home." But I did stick it out. And in fact, I went back about 2 years later and did an alumni course. And the group was a little bit more diverse. They weren't all, high-flying professionals. And I felt I'd learned a lot more and I was able to hold my own. But it taught me a huge amount. I mean, it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, being in that building and listening to him, going up through the floors and seeing all his work there and everything to do with his creativity. It was an absolute bucket list experience.
Is there anything that you took from that journey, the street photography side of things, that does transfer into what you do now? Because it's so different. It is
very different, yeah. Although, I mean, in some ways, I'm capturing something that can't be replicated, whether it's with sort of camera movement. I mean, Jade bangs on about light, gesture, and colour, and those are the three aspects that I try to incorporate in my work. Colour has always been an absolute passion of mine. I've tried to shoot in black and white, and it just doesn't do it for me. I'm really, really interested in colour, and I know Jay has studied colour, in depth. In great depth. I think he was a student of Joseph Albert, if I'm not mistaken. And gesture as well. I mean, that's an indefinable something that just makes a picture sing somehow. And it's not something that you don't have to have a human being in it to have gesture in an image. It can be captured in many, many ways. So I do try to take those teachings through and reflect them in the work that I do today.
So from there, you went on to meet Chris Friel or see his work and be influenced there. Was there like a definitive, like that it just clicked moment when you saw that picture of Chris's?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, without a shadow of a doubt. And I owe him a great debt of gratitude because, I don't know what I'd be doing really if I hadn't come across that. Maybe I'd have found him some other way. I don't know. But I then obviously started researching his work and I realised that there was this way forward for me, not just his colour work, but the black and white work that he'd done of his family and the beach at Whitstable where he lives. And I was just totally hooked, and it was just a way of making images that I didn't think was possible.
So it said on your website that minimalism hasn't captured your interest, but detail, clutter, confusion, and most importantly, imperfection holds more appeal. Which makes me think that you would like the inside of my house, really. But anyway,
well, you can see behind me how cluttered my room is. I don't do minimalist.
Right. So, what is it about that grabs you? I find the clutter in my house. I find it quite stressful. But it gives you some kind of peace, or you thrive in it. What can you say about that?
Well, it's funny you say that because I just did an interview with somebody else to promote PhotoFest, PhotoSpeed's PhotoFest, where I'm speaking in September, and there were a series of questions, and I don't know what the question was, but it led me to describe the state of my desk, and I'm one of these people, and also my inbox. I don't know if it's the Virgo in me, but I have to have a tidy desk. I have to have tidiness around me. I don't mind if the rest of the house is a shambles, but in my working area, I do get very stressed if there's stuff all over the place, piles of stuff, and likewise my inbox. I can't really set to work and do anything creative until that's all tidy and in order. So there's a bit of a disparity going on there. I don't really know what it's about. Certainly when it comes to my image making, I find perfection quite boring. I suppose most of us as photographers would much rather take the picture of perhaps an old person with wrinkles and interest in their face rather than the perfection of a young teenage girl. I mean, for me, I would, or a man, obviously. I think there is much more interest in perfection, and I think that it's something that carries through into. I don't do portraits, but into the work that I do. I don't try to clone out every imperfection. When I used to paint, I was taught by a brilliant man as an adult, as a mature student, called Robin Child, and he used to teach us to leave our mistakes on the canvas. You couldn't have a rubber. You leave your mistakes on the canvas, and you work around them, and you work over them, and eventually, I think that gives an image its energy and its depth.
Do you think? I think you touched on it before, but photography, landscape anyway, other types of photography for sure, can be quite prescriptive in the process, with the landscape. Yes. And then of course we want to perfect things after the fact as well. Do you think we're missing something by having this sort of perfectionist sort of approach?
Well, I can't be pejorative about it. This is just what works for me. I mean, there are a lot of people who love doing long exposures, and I have tried the black and white long exposure thing, and it takes a huge amount of discipline, and you have to be very precise about what you do, and your filters that go on, everything's got to be clean and free of thumbprints. And for a start, my personality isn't like that. I don't work like that. I'm a bit shambolic in my approach, and there are generally smears all over my lenses and what have you. So it doesn't work. But it also produces images of a sort of studied perfection that I don't find, they don't move me. But that's not to say, I'm not saying they don't have value, because we're all in it for different ideas.
Sure.
And I can only approach what I do with my own objectives and my own sort of artistic background. But I know, that type of photography has a huge following, and rightly so. It's a great discipline, but it's not one that I'm interested in pursuing, nor I think do I have the ability to do so.
For landscapes, I have to say I do shoot that way, because I can recently when I've been getting back into landscapes, I can go in and I can do a long exposure, and I can do it very quickly relative to, it's a 2-minute exposure or whatever, but there's a little process to get to the shot, which might take 10 or 15 minutes, and if conditions are going your way, you can really get in and out and do it very well. And I know what the result will be, beforehand. I think my background as a commercial photographer, you have to go in and do a thing, and you have to come away with it, So I would find that's how I've been sort of conditioned to have to go and produce a result that I know what it'll be. But I think with the ICM and the multiples, it's sort of the opposite of that, isn't it? You're never going to, or can you know with experience what you're going to get?
You can have some idea, but for example, I was up in Glencoe with Doug last winter. We were making a series of videos, which we want to sell on the website. And we took a videographer with us, and we were each doing sessions, and I did one on the blend modes that I would choose. And we found this little icy puddle, and I did a little piece to camera about how I choose which blend mode, and do I know in advance. And I sort of went into a long spiel about, generally now, because I've been doing it so long, I have some idea of which blend mode I'm going to use. So I shot off a series of images of this little pond with some leaves and stuff in it, in a certain blend mode, using the approach that I thought would work. And then just as he was wrapping up, I said, "Oh, well, I'll just try it in the other blend mode. It's going to be a waste of time. I know it is. It's not going to work because of the way the light was falling. And shooting this way, you learn to look for tonal values as much as anything else." I said, "The tonal values are all too similar. It's just going to be a muddy mess." And I started, and to my absolute amazement, it was far, far better than the piece that I'd already shot. So that sort of taught me a lesson, really. Never say never, and always keep experimenting. It's a way of shooting that rewards an inquiring mind and a willingness to experiment and to play with the camera. And it's certainly not for everybody, as I say. If you need to get the job done, and for whatever reason, then it's possibly not for you. But I can go out and get in a very meditative state of mind, just sort of playing with the camera, trying different settings, and throwing around ideas in my head, and just waiting for something to come together. It doesn't always come together. Sometimes it's abject failure. But it's just a way of shooting that suits me.
So what's the rewarding part for you? Is it the end or the process?
It's all, I suppose, all of those things. I'm a bit constrained by time at the moment, like a lot of people. There's just not enough of it. And I no longer have the time to think, well, I'll go out and spend a day shooting. I'm lucky I've got a big garden, so there's a lot of inspiration here for me. But I don't tend to go down to the coast, for example, anything that'll take a day out of my time, because, with the workshops and what have you, I just haven't got it. Okay. So I tend to shoot when I'm on holiday because I've got time. Or perhaps when I'm teaching, if there's a bit of downtime when there's, the clients are all off doing their own thing, I might have. But obviously you can't switch off to the same degree. So you sort of tailor your approach to the given circumstances. Yeah. But to go back to your question, I really enjoy the challenge of seeing something and thinking, well, how am I going to make the best of this? And what is it I'm trying to say? And for me, it's about portraying, not portraying things, but aspects of those things or ideas about those things, whether it's an emotion, a piece of music, or it's a very abstract way of thinking, and I tend to work in an abstract way more and more. So what it does mean is I can pretty much go anywhere. I haven't got to go to a honeypot location and make an image. I can, just a nondescript body of water or some leaves on the ground, by moving the camera around, I can sort of create abstraction. And I really enjoy that challenge of being able to make something out of nothing. So I suppose for me that is probably the most rewarding part. I find the editing a bit frustrating. Sometimes it comes together, sometimes it feels like pulling teeth. But the whole process is good.
Are you thinking about the editing from the front end? Do you feel like it's a whole joined up process? Or?
No, not necessarily, no. I'm trying to get in the camera as close to what it is that I'm trying to portray. I mean, I do a reasonable amount of editing, but I'd rather get it right in camera.
Yeah. I just wanted to, this style of photography, it has become more popular recently.
Yes, it has, yeah.
When you started to do this, when it was something that's so different from what was sort of the done thing at the time, did you have doubts about it, or did you have to ask yourself if it was okay to do it, or was there any other voice that was saying, well, it's not, it's just not the done thing, so is it okay to do?
That's a good question, actually. Firstly, yes, I didn't realise it was okay to move my camera around. I had sort of done it before by accident and thought, oh, that's quite nice, but, it's obviously it's not valid, so, I'm not going to pursue that. But then seeing Chris's work, and I obviously researched other people doing similar things, although I couldn't find many at the time, it did give it credibility, and I realised that it was okay to do that. The other difficult thing was because I built up a following on Flickr, all of a sudden you're changing direction, and you're not posting what people expect you to post, and that takes quite a lot of courage, to go against expectation. And I've said before, the comments on Flickr, and it's all pretty meaningless, but we all love a pat on the back, and all of a sudden I was posting this stuff that was just well, a lot of people couldn't understand it. Very small few people were really interested, and gradually build up a new following. So perhaps the impetus to carry on, although it was very difficult at first, I just felt that I'd found something, and I just knew I had to pursue it regardless of what anybody else thought about it. But it's one of the comments that a lot of people who come on the course, come on our courses, say, they're perhaps in a camera club, and they've got to submit an image for their monthly or weekly competition or what have you, and then they've got to put up with everybody's comments because it's different to what they've done before and it's not proper photography. I think it's gradually gaining acceptance. I mean, the one thing that really annoys me is when you get the camera club judges who just immediately denigrate anything that is done with an alternative technique. And I think what a lot of them fail to realise that art and photography evolve. They have to evolve. They have to move on. And you don't necessarily have to like this way of shooting, but I think it's not unreasonable to respect that it exists and that it's valid. And I know certainly from a lot of the comments that I get from the people I teach, there are many camera club judges who've got completely closed minds about it, and I think that's a great pity.
But for you in this process, that I think what you're saying was that you had, it resonated with you anyway internally, the style of shooting, and that was enough to drive you because you felt
it was. I knew that it was what I wanted to do, and it was what I've been looking for.
Yeah, but when you stood out from what you were doing before and going against what your audience would have expected, was that uncomfortable in some way, or did it take some courage to keep going, or did you think?
It was uncomfortable. And I think at the beginning of your previous question, you said something about feeling comfortable with what you do now, and I'm never satisfied with what I do. I don't think that ever changes. I think the day you think you've cracked it and you know exactly what you're doing is the day you might as well give up. So it's one of those things, the more you learn, the more you realise there is to learn. So I don't think I'm any more confident about it now. I mean, obviously I teach and all the rest of it, so things have changed from that perspective. But, I'm still constantly striving to make an image that I'm really happy with. And I don't know, maybe that'll never happen. I think it comes with creativity, doesn't it? Most of us, I think, are like that. We don't strut around thinking, my God, we're marvellous. We see the mistakes, we see the errors, we see the ways that the images could be better. And I suppose that's what drives us forward.
So in the process of shooting, I don't think you just go in, you take the one shot and you're done. You have to go through a process to find the image that you're making, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, I'll find something that takes my eye, and there's a tree or a leaf or a coastline or whatever, and it's not unusual for me to sit there for 40 minutes, started to think about what it is I want to say, and then B, trying to agree on the settings on the camera that are going to enable me to say that and make the image that I'm trying to make, or a set of images. What I tend to do is try to shoot a set of images that will go in a gallery, maybe 6 or 9 images that I can put on in a gallery on my website. And that can take anything from 45 minutes if it's flowing well, or it can take several hours and several visits. It's a sort of process of constant experimentation. What if I do this, and what if I do that? And
But what are you following there? It just has to look right to you, or it has to feel right to you, or how do you know that you're sort of getting down the right track with it?
Well, firstly, as I said before, I don't want the technique to speak louder than the image, and that's not always easy. When I first came to multiple exposures, I suddenly realised that I could repeat a white gate across an image 9 times. Well, just because I could do it didn't mean to say that I should do it, and it took me a while to realise that. So obvious repetition is something I try to avoid, and there are a lot of different settings on the camera that you can change throughout the sequence. Obviously, you can combine multiple exposure with ICM, and that creates blur and abstracts detail. You can change your white balance as you go along. You can change lenses. You can change where you point your camera. You can zoom in and out, turn the camera upside down, inside out. There are just infinite number of options at your disposal. So I just sort of start down the road and just keep fine-tuning what I'm doing to get an image that is starting to work. Abstraction is my thing, colour is my thing. So if I can create a pleasing set of shapes on the back of the camera with some compelling colours, then I'm sort of halfway there.
You've got a couple of touchstones in there that you still can bounce off, do you know?
Yeah.
It sounds
like. So there will have been something that's caught my eye, whether it's the way the light dances on the water, or whether it's in fact, as I'm speaking, I'm just in the middle of editing a series of images I took from the outside of an old greenhouse at Kew Gardens. Everybody else was inside photographing the orchids, and I went outside, and there were sort of what seemed to be years and years of old leaves stuck to the window. And they're very, very abstract and sort of green and murky. But there was just something there about the way these delicate leaves had stuck so tenaciously to the inside of this glass house that really caught my eye. And I just worked that area I was there for about an hour. And in fact, I've been back several times doing the same thing to try and build up a series. So it can be something as simple as stupid as a leaf. And that leaf suddenly sort of speaks to me. I think, well, it's still sitting there. I wonder how long it's been there. And obviously, it sort of brings to mind all sorts of ideas about time and how that evolves, and the pattern that's built up on the inside of the greenhouse, all the algae and what have you. So, that's an example of something that might catch my eye, and I would work through those ideas to try and get a project. I have to say, it's not going very well. I've been trying to pull something out of it for about 3 weeks now, and I'm just not getting what I want. So I might have to go back again and give it another go.
Are you quite tenacious with that then? You're going to keep trying until you get it? You feel like there's something there? Or is there a
yes, this one I will. Sometimes I'll just give up and say, well, it isn't what I thought it was. But with this, it's really, I just love the soft abstraction and the delicate, fragile elements that are fused to the window. And it's I did a book recently called Fragile, and the sort of fragile elements in the landscape is something that runs through my work. It's something I'm quite interested in.
Have you had times or seasons where you just have felt like you'd fallen out of your rhythm, or you haven't been able to find the images that you look for? You felt like you've been failing at all? And if you've had those, how do you deal with that? Move things forward, freshen it up, or bounce back from those times?
Well, that's quite a timely question, actually, because I've been going through a bit of a slump in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I haven't been out shooting, but I've been trying to go through my Lightroom catalogue. Like most of us, it gets horribly bloated, and I don't sort of edit it as often as I should. So going through, I've been out shooting when we've been on workshops and what have you, and haven't even bothered to look at haven't had the time to look at the images. So I'm just trying to go through it all now and find something that I think is worthwhile working on, and say day after day after day. There's just been nothing, and I think it's probably a lot to do with my state of mind. My brother was killed in a fire last year, and I think I sort of put the breathing thing on hold, and it's for various reasons. It's hit me again fairly recently, and I think depression is obviously a big factor when it comes to creativity, and I don't know. I've been sitting down. Everything I look at, it just looks terrible. As I'm sorry, I'm not. This is not a cry for sympathy. A lot of creatives go through this. You sort of start questioning everything you're doing, and nothing seems to have value. And today is the first day where I've come down and I've sort of felt a bit more buoyant about things. So, but there are all sorts of different factors that affect it. And I think you've just got to either walk away from it and do something else, or perhaps take images in a different way using a different lens, or just try and break the pattern of what you've been doing, or say just give it a break for a couple of weeks and hope that it'll return, because it will. I mean, it's inside all of us, so it has to come out.
You were saying before you haven't been shooting much lately for yourself.
No.
Do you feel like if you were able to find some time to do that, it would lighten things up a bit internally?
I think it probably would. I think that's what I need to do, is go out and make some images for myself when I've got a bunch of clients who are sort of, relying on me, and the time is just my own. And I may well do that actually this coming weekend. It's only, obviously the workshop season runs, throughout the autumn and then through the spring. And it's only the last couple of weeks that I've really got time on my hands to start doing my own shooting. Of course, it does coincide with the summertime, which is not ideal light, as you know. But I really believe that creativity thrives on boundaries. So, if you wait for the perfect time to go out where all the planets are in alignment and everything is beautiful, then you don't have to think as much. When you're battling with obstacles and boundaries, it just encourages you to think differently, and perhaps think in a way that would not be obvious if the conditions were more appealing.
Just to touch on what you said again, I know for me, it's probably the best thing I can do for mental health is to go out and be taking pictures. I haven't been doing it lately. I'm okay, but I know that there are times previously when I've struggled. I don't know if I'm an introvert, I think, like you said as well, and it just being out there on your own and having some space, and you've got something to do with your hands, your thinking, your eyes in the camera. Yeah. It's quite an immersive experience, and you put your whole self into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It takes you to another place. I know that sounds a bit fanciful, but you do. You just go off into another realm and invariably come away from it feeling better, even if the pictures turn out to be rubbish. It's just the experience of sort of, I don't know, being so close to nature for one thing, and this sort of incredible concentration. I mean, with obviously the same applies with long exposure image making. You have to concentrate and you have to get it right, and you go into the zone, and I think it's a sort of meditative process, isn't it, which, as you say, helps mental health.
How do you find then, because you're running a lot of workshops, so you must have to be on and with people and present for those people. Is that, in some ways, is it challenging? I'm sure you enjoy it, of course. I'm not asking you to say you don't, but is it a challenge to be with people for a couple of days full on?
It is a challenge, and it was the one thing that worried me the greatest when Charlie Wake got in touch and said, "Do you want to run some workshops with Light and Land?" And I'd done a couple with Doug just because people had asked me to, and decided I really wasn't going to do it anymore. And then Charlie got in touch. I mean, obviously I was hugely flattered, and I'd give it serious consideration. But apart from being very worried that I wasn't up to the job, the biggest thing that concerned me was spending time with people. And firstly, I have to say that almost without exception, the people that we get to teach are lovely people. Photographers tend to be nice, gentle people. But as I said, I'm an introvert, and spending time with people, it sucks the energy out of me. And I can sit around a dinner table and we are with them most of the day. But the sort of 8 hours that you have in your room at the end of the night is a sort of, it's I look forward to it. And when I come back after 4 or 5 days, back to my husband and 2 dogs and nobody else, it's lovely. And you just regenerate yourself. Yeah. I think extroverts, they feed off energy, don't they, in a room? So it's very different for them. But I'm very lucky, as I say, the people that I get to spend time with, almost without exception, are lovely people. I'm with friends.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just going to say, I can relate. I led a safari in Kenya recently. You're in close quarters because you're in the 4x4.
Yeah, of course.
Then we were going to have meals together, and then you're in the 4x4 at night again. And I knew from experience that we go really badly wrong, but I was able to find some time. I did this sort of video blogging from the safari, and I was able to lock myself away in my tent at night and do that stuff, which I think was really good to recharge me, and then I was ready to go again in the morning. But it can be, the prospect of it can be quite stressful, but I think your people will find you through it as well. The people who come, as you said, somehow they'll be your kind of people, They tend to be. I mean, people. Now that Doug and I are doing our own workshops,
we sort of know all the people on the mailing list, and they come to us because they like our approach, and it works both ways. So yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. We don't get any difficult clients, and they're all generally really nice people to spend time with, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that.
Going forward, Valda, how do you feel or foresee things going? Can you know how things are going to develop, or do you find that one idea bounces you in a different direction that you didn't foresee?
Are you talking about creatively?
Yes.
Work. No, I'm always sort of pushing boundaries, trying, poking away at different things, asking questions. What I'm quite mindful of not doing is sort of getting into a rut and finding a way of shooting that, I know that the X, Y, and Z works, so I'll go and repeat it over and over again. I have to say it's something I tend to perhaps take to extremes. A recent exhibition we did at the Oxo, I decided to go down a different road with the presentation of the images, and I started distressing copper and mounted the images on copper and applied gold leaf. And even the night before the exhibition, I suddenly decided that I'd had them all printed and framed, but the ratio of print to copper was wrong. So I took them all apart, printed them all out again, did all the gold leaf again, assembled them all again. And it was such a small thing, but I was just so freaked about the fact that, I was trying this new deal at the Oxo Gallery on the South Bank. I don't know what I was thinking, really. I could have tried a slightly quieter venue, I think. Fortunately, they were well received and they sold well. But it sort of taught me a lesson, really, because in the days and weeks coming up to the exhibition, I started to feel really sick with, anticipation and worry about, what on earth am I trying to do here? But I think that you have to be, well, it's been said before, you have to be prepared to fail, don't you, in order to advance. So it's just, just trying different things, and ideas bubble up from nowhere. It might be a poem, reading a book, seeing a movie, seeing something that triggers the response, and I wonder how I can interpret that, and maybe there's something here that I could weave into my work somehow. It's always being open to new ideas. I remember one of Jay's most brilliant quotes, and there are many of his pearls of wisdom that I've got tucked away. He said somebody once asked him how to be a better photographer, and he said, become a more interesting person. I'm not trying to say I'm an interesting person, but there's so much truth in that. The more you expose yourself to different forms of creativity, the more the ideas come.
And so is that something you actively do? You keep yourself open, you're looking for different influences in music, like you said, in poetry, books, etc.
When time allows, unfortunately, I say time is, I have, apart from the work that I do with Doug and Light and Land, my husband and I have two elderly mothers, and my husband's business runs from home. We have two dogs, and there's just I'm juggling a million balls. So there is weeks go by where I don't even have time to pick up a newspaper. I'm so busy. I have sort of 12-hour days. So that's difficult. But we've got 2 months coming up now with very few commitments. So I'm hoping that I can immerse myself in going to exhibitions and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have quality input, isn't it? I know when I've been in spells of putting out a lot, like recently earlier with the Safari and a couple of other things that I did, a lot was going out, but I was aware that I wasn't having time or making time to have stuff come in.
That's right, yeah.
And I think it's really important to keep that balance, for your sanity, really, if nothing else. What is, for me, photography's brought me so many brilliant experiences, places, people. What's the greatest thing, or some of the greatest things photography has brought to you?
I suppose it seems bizarre because I was just talking about lack of confidence and uncertainty about one's work, but it has given me a certain kind of confidence. The fact that my work has been taken up by galleries and well received, it doesn't necessarily make me feel any more confident about what I'm doing. I still question it all the time, but it's given me a sort of inner satisfaction that I've got this far. I've sort of achieved something, that my work has gained a certain amount of recognition, and that people, I'm really humbled that people want to be taught by me, and it's a huge responsibility and a great honour to teach people. I'm very much aware of that, but it makes me feel sort of quietly pleased. I didn't excel at school at all, and I grew up in a family where one brother went to Oxford and the other one went to Cambridge, and there were scholarships and all sorts flying around, and they were very, very academic and very, very brilliant, and I just wasn't. So it obviously affects you, that sort of thing. And I grew up for many years thinking that, you know, it was a complete failure and a waste of time, and absolutely without any ability, although I could draw and I could paint to a certain degree. So I suppose I'm quite pleased now that, certainly for my mum's sake, I've managed to do something. And she's a painter as well, so she's obviously thrilled to bits. And it's just brought me this lovely life. I get to travel to these places, and I go off and wave my husband goodbye, and I can tell him it's work. Yeah, okay, I'm going off to the Camargue for 5 days to shoot some horses and drink gin and tonic in the evening as the sun goes down, and I'm getting paid for this. So, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good. I can have some parallels there, and with not doing so well earlier in life, and the journey that photography can give you, I think, you just never know where you're going to end up. So,
and they're lovely people as well. I mean, I don't really do social media. I struggle with getting out there and promoting myself. And again, I know that's the point of social media, but I've really got to be on top of the world, and preferably with a couple of glasses of wine in me before I've got the courage is not the right word, but before I feel that there's any point in uploading, a link to a gallery or, come and look at me, this is what I've done. I find it incredibly difficult.
Do you have a desire to almost knock yourself, like self-deprecation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think anybody on Twitter will sort of say, so that's one of my rare talents is self-deprecation. Okay. And of course, if you post something, you're going to get comments coming back, and you have to find a way of fielding those comments. And self-deprecation is the easiest. But then there's the false modesty thing, and too much humility isn't a great thing either. So you can sort of argue yourself into a wormhole. So for me, very often the easiest way is just to withdraw and think, oh well, I'm not going to get involved in all that because I just can't deal with it. And I know it's pathetic, and I know it's stupid. But and there's such a lovely bunch of people on social media, and it's a lovely environment. I've learnt so much, certainly from the contacts I follow. But it's just something I just find incredibly difficult.
Do you find that self-deprecation is quite damaging, can be damaging for your confidence?
Yeah, I don't think it does me any favours, to be honest. But my whole family are like that, so I don't. I think I'm probably hardwired to be that way.
If there's difficulties as a creative person, right? Things will come up. You'll lose confidence. You might have a bad spell, etc. But I don't know. You find the courage somehow to keep going, right? You obviously have. I have. What makes you want to keep going when it's difficult?
Because I can't imagine myself not doing it. I'm driven to create, and it's one of the first urges I can remember as a child. Always, I had to be making things, creating things. And it's propelled me forward ever since. So I honestly can't imagine not doing it. And I love it. I love doing it. I mean, it's not work for the most part. It's just something that I just, it just fulfills me completely. So even when, one's confidence is at rock bottom, I'm aware that it's going to pass, and I just got to work through it because that's what I want to do. I don't have to do it. I could go off and do something else, but it's what I want to do.
And when you saw, say, that exhibition we just spoke about at the Oxo, you saw that hanging, you must have been quite a buzz.
It was a buzz when people were coming in and making nice comments. I wasn't sure at first. I thought I just pushed the envelope too far, and it was just a gimmick too far. And but and then I sold a few, and of course there's nothing like a couple of sales to give yourself a bit more confidence. And the stuff that Doug and I were showing was very, very different to what everybody else. It was a group exhibition. There were 9 of us, and our work, both of us, was very different. And I think, say, Doug had a real sort of crisis as well just before the exhibition. It's incredibly hard to put yourself out there. You're putting your soul on the line, basically. This is who I am, and this is what I've done for the last 6 months. And you've got no way of knowing how it's going to be received. So. It's quite a courageous thing to do, I think. So perhaps it would have been unusual if we hadn't been anxious. And in fact, everybody, as they came in to hang their images, all the other exhibitors there, and they're all people I know, all said exactly the same thing, how fed up they were of seeing their own work, because they'd worked with it day in, day out for the last however many weeks and months, and it was stale to them. And they come and they see everybody else's work, and it's fresh and new. But of course, you're not looking at it with jaded eyes. or critical eyes. So I think that's something else to bear in mind when you look at other people's work and it all looks so exciting, and you look at your own, and because you're working and you're too close to it, it's sort of inevitable that it's more difficult to be objective about it. So I do try to keep that in mind as well, and that pushes me forward.
Okay, I'm going to let you off the hook now, Valda. Thank you so much.
It's
Thanks
okay.
for your time. Really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you very much. I'm flattered that you would ask me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm flattered that you agreed to come on. Well, I hope you took as much away from that conversation as I did. What an insight into the thoughts of a great artist. So thanks again, Valda. Follow Valda on Instagram and check out her website, valdabailey.com, and also her tuition website. The links to some of the other things that came up in the conversation are in the show notes. I'd love to connect with you, and you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and at the Viewfinders webpage, links in the show notes. If you enjoy the podcast, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and leave a kind review. It's the best thing you can do to help me get the show in front of more people. If you're a new listener, go check out some other episodes. Thanks for listening. Enjoy your photography. I'll see you out there.